The Australian Energy Market Operator, the so-called AEMO, one of the most overweight, useless bureaucracies in the land, which fields a CEO and no less than 9 executive general managers, including an EGM for, quote, people and culture, excuse me, all of whom ultimately you pay for as a consumer, has downgraded in the space of just 1 year its forecast for the number of EVs in Australia in just 10 years' time. See, last year, the entrails of the goat they slaughtered on this and other similarly advanced economic modelling techniques told them 7 million EVs by 2034. This year, different entrails from a completely different economic modelling goat told them it's going to be just 4 million EVs by then. Perhaps, I don't know, we got a goat upgrade this time. Where do you or I sign up for a job such as this, right? Where you can be out by 43% year on year with absolutely no consequences or repercussions. It's AEMO, I suppose, or the Bureau of Meteorology, isn't it? 4 million EVs is still a substantial number of EVs, dude. It is, of course, a 4-lane super highway of gridlocked EVs, which would stretch from Sydney to Perth with no air in between the bumpers. I would argue that's a hell of a lot of EVs. The big question, obviously, what will AEMO's dead goat's guts tell them next year? Is it going to be 2.5 million EVs or maybe just 1.5? I'm John Cadogan from AutoExpert.com.au. New cars cheap, but Australia only. Website. Card. Let's just think about this AEMO EV nonsense on fundamentals, shall we? You've got 10 years to achieve, say, 4 million EVs on Australian roads. How many EVs do we have out there now? New EV purchases in Australia more than doubled in 2023 compared to 2022, with the total number of EVs on Australian roads now exceeding 180,000. That's the somewhat grandiose and legitimate-sounding Electric Vehicle Council, which is in fact a grubby little vested interest lobby group pushing the virtue barrow for a diverse group of corporate masturbators, including coal-burning power station operators and finance companies hoping to rake in big fat stacks of EV novated leasing cash, as opposed to, legitimate planet savers. This figure of 180,000 actually includes plug-in hybrids. Let's ballpark it, however, throwing logic to the four corners of the earth at 200,000 EVs on our roads right now, plus another 100,000 sold this year in 2024, also including plug-in hybrids, but let us not worry too hard about that. Equals a total of 300,000 battery EVs and plug-ins on our roads by the end of 2024. 300,000. There's 9 more years to go until we get to 2034, of course, so that's 3.7 million EVs to go in 9 years. So it's time to man up on this and face the cold hard facts, I'd suggest. To achieve this downwardly revised but still entirely bullshit proposal of 4 million EVs, we would need sustained geometric EV sales growth, right? We're selling 100,000 battery EVs and plug-in hybrids this year. Have a guess what the percentage growth rate of EV sales has to be for 9 years consecutively without a break to make useless AEMO's prediction come true. This report is sponsored by Saily, the new eSIM app backed by Nord Security. Saily is an awesome solution for staying connected without incurring those dreaded roaming charges. More at saily.com/AEJC. As a journalist, I've been basically everywhere, and I've had the sky-high roaming bills to prove it. But you can sidestep those with Saily. Just select the country you're heading to, choose a data plan, download the Saily app, and activate the plan before you leave. When you arrive, you step off the aircraft completely connected. A couple of clicks is all it takes. No need to sprint for a hotspot. Saily just works. Go to saily.com/AEJC now. You'll get 15% off. You'll never have to stand in a queue for a SIM card again, and you'll be seamlessly connected back home. Link in the description. Saily is available in over 150 countries. It's Android and iOS compatible. There's 24/7 chat support. And if you later discover that your device is not eSIM compatible, you will get a full refund. An eSIM is simple. The app plus your device's hardware creates a virtual SIM inside your phone or a tablet or smartwatch, so there's no need to install a physical SIM for every country that you plan on visiting. Go to saily.com/AEJC now and use promo code AEJC to get that 15% off. Stay connected when you travel and slash that dreaded roaming bill as well. You can trust Saily. It's brought to you by Nord Security. Here in Australia, sadly, an advanced education is a social curse, certainly. It hardly ever gets you laid, dude. At least not in the way you'd want. But it does have a certain utility, I have to say. See, in 5 minutes with a Google spreadsheet, you can model this 4 million EV nonsense proposition. Here is my model, and admittedly, it's not that glamorous. I didn't spend any time formatting, go figure. But it tells me we need sustained EV sales growth of 27.5% year on year, every long year for 9 years without a break to get to 4 million EVs in total by 2034, meaning by the end of 2033. Now, this is clearly ridiculous, like ridiculously ambitious, I would argue. But of course, the average electric utopian numpty in Australia cannot see this because mathematics, so complex, like so abstract. And it disagrees entirely with the Book of Elon. It casts aspersions of electric dystopia, which is a venial sin, quite the heresy. In other words, next year, we need to sell like 127,500 EVs. In 2026, it's just over 160,000, and sales go up 27.5% every year. By 2033, roughly 2/3 of all vehicles sold would need to be EVs to hit AEMO's bullshit target, which they just pulled out of their arse, or their goat's arse, more accurately, with some economic bullshit justification in the manner of economists everywhere. And if you are an economist, pro tip, dude, for all you outrage economists, you all think economics is kind of like bare knuckle physics, only harder. It's not. 27.5%. The current growth rate of battery EV sales in Australia for the first 8 months of 2024, 1.4%. 1.4. This is with massive incentivisation, like the federal government FBT exemption on novated leases for EVs and plug-ins. But the exemption on plug-ins is being retired on April the 1st of next year, so act now if you want to rake it in there. autoexpert.com.au/novated-lease for some assistance there. I'm not above that, dude. I'm hardly anti-EV or anti-plug-in. But I am a pragmatist and I'm pro-fact. This is not a transition out there on the roads, right? It's a slow evolution. We're adding an alternative powertrain, right? That's all that's happening. EVs will only foreseeably ever be 25 or 30% of all vehicles on our roads, foreseeably. Incidentally, the most recent Treasury estimate of the cost of this EV incentive program, i.e. the amount of cash the government had to forego to stimulate EV sales in this way, is that it's costing more than 4 times over what it was initially proposed to cost. The initial proposal, $260 million. The January Treasury estimate, $1.15 billion. So it's not just AEMO that can afford to be so wrong. It's hard to see the government reaching any deeper into its hip pocket every year to ramp up EV sales as required to get to the 4 million, right? See, from 2022 to 2023, the incentives kicked in for the first time. EV sales, predictably enough, went through the roof, but off a low base, from 33,000 to 87,000. And that is the numerical proof of the incentives at work. But this year, EV sales are very stagnant, 1.4%. That incentive, therefore, stimulates roughly 60,000 additional EV sales every year, okay? But it's not growing, right? That's what it does. They would need to spend more to incentivise ongoing 27.5% growth, a lot more. And if PDUT gets in the next federal election, good old starchy Voldemort, Mrs. Potato Head's illegitimate Mattel toy boy, I suspect one of the first items on his agenda will be the deconstruction of any Labor EV incentive program. And dude, watch the sales just crash after that. This happens in every market where incentives get boned. They only stimulate sales when they operate. This critical mass concept is a complete governmental fantasy. There's no sustained effect after you bone the incentives. They just crash. And AEMO is off its frickin' meds. Where is this required 27.5% annual growth in EV sales actually going to come from? Draw me the diagram, dude, because I'm not seeing it. Not just for 1 year, right? For the next 9 in a row. I wouldn't pay AEMO to mind the family fish and chip shop for an afternoon, let alone model something important for the next decade. What magic lever gets pulled to supercharge EV sales over almost a decade when globally EV sales are going profoundly out the back door? GM, Ford, three-prong, Volkswagen, Volvo, Jetta, they're all ramping EV production back, pulling billions from purported proposals, right? EV proposals, these grandiose plans. Ford already ran the mad experiment on electric utes, didn't it? And it did not work. It's delaying the next electric pickup, and the new 3-row Ford SUV is going to be a hybrid now. In Australia, diesel light vehicle sales grew by 19% in 2021. They grew 4% in 2022, 5% in 2023, and 6.4% so far this year. Our market currently buys 5 new diesels for every new EV and 20 new diesels for every plug-in hybrid. These are called facts. Diesel vehicle sales are totally organic. They are not subsidised or incentivised in any way. These vehicles are what ordinary Australians actually want. Consumers are speaking with their wallets, and useless politician arseholes would do well to listen, in my estimation, because consumers vote, and many of them do not want this ideologically driven EV nonsense shoved any further down their throats. In many cases, including with the most popular vehicles, an electric equivalent is simply unavailable even if you wanted one. 5 of the top 10 vehicles for August this year are the Ranger, the Hilux, the D-Max, Land Cruiser and Everest. Show me the electric alternative that is capable of doing what these insanely popular vehicles do. It does not exist, and to my knowledge, it is not even in the wings. Net zero is a fantasy that can only be embraced with a straight face when you divorce reality. And the only organisations that can divorce reality are organisations such as AEMO, whose legitimacy is at best questionable. Our role is to manage the electricity and gas systems and markets across Australia, helping to ensure Australians have access to affordable, secure and reliable energy. AEMO there grandiosely discussing itself on its website. How about we go down the pub next Friday night and we vox pop punters about how damn well AEMO is doing with ensuring that affordable, secure and reliable energy. My own view is that such an in-pub poll would reveal that we all think they're little more than overpaid, pointless cocks. AEMO has built a purpose-led and values-based culture with strong uplifts in employee engagement, diversity and inclusion, customer orientation and financial performance. Okay, so AEMO is all sounding just a little bit, ever so slightly, Donald Trump close protection detail, isn't it? Incidentally, AEMO has 3 scenarios in play in its somewhat disconnected modelling, personal opinion. One of those is the unavailability of new combustion vehicles in 3 time frames, which would be 2035, 2045 and 2060. So that's when the internal combustion new vehicle tap goes off, according to AEMO. They also model the commercial services collapse for internal combustion vehicles in 2045, 2050 and 2060. And they further claim that only 10% of people, meaning Australians, ultimately would prefer combustion vehicles irrespective of EV or fuel cell vehicle costs or features. What colour is the sky on AEMO's world? Based on laggards generally being no larger than a third of customers, sustainable growth assumes ICEs suffer a collapse in manufacturing due to systemic loss of supporting infrastructure. Kind of a big assumption, I'd argue. Perhaps we should get Toyota or Mazda on the line and warn them of this impending collapse in case they're, I don't know, too busy planning an uplift in employee engagement or pushing the boundaries of diversity and inclusion to notice the impending collapse of their entire global business model. Hashtag not likely. In my view, this is exactly what it looks like when reality rings up and says, hey, AEMO, it's over, dude, and it's not me, it's you. But let's say, suspending disbelief completely, momentarily, that AEMO is right and we get 4 million light EVs on the road by 2034, let us further knee reality in the nuts by allowing those vehicles to be charged only with clean energy and embody no CO2 whatsoever in their construction. That would be 1 in 4 light vehicles, literally 0 emissions, and of course reality just over there curled up on the floor, gasping for breath and clutching its gonads. Transport is 20% of Australia's emissions, okay? That's according to the federal government. Light vehicles are about half of that, so around 10%, and 1/4 of light vehicles being 0 emissions would mean a 2.5% reduction in national greenhouse emissions. 2.5%. Jesus Christ. This is what ideology-inspired nonsense achieves, i.e., nothing worth having. Frankly, and everyone with a technical education can absolutely see this, a world without hydrocarbon energy is an epic nightmare hellscape for future humanity. I'm not just talking about cars, I'm talking about civilization in toto, which is leveraged against coal, oil and gas at a deep fundamental level, and which would implode if hydrocarbon energy systematically collapsed. This is not about petrol for me, okay? It's not about anything like that. It's not about being a boomer who can't understand that there's new technology, which is such a common accusation in the comments. It's about going back to caves. We don't want to do that. It's about croaking in your 30s, you know, like in the olden days when you break your leg or you get a toothache, because these are the kinds of things that civilizations save us from. It's about not having to bust your ass in a field from dawn until dusk every day just to feed you and your family, because that's what hydrocarbon energy achieves. Everything you take for granted, from food to steel to concrete, plastics, frickin' pharmaceuticals, medical care, electricity, heating and industrial processes generally, would completely disappear in the aftermath of a complete hydrocarbon collapse. Without hydrocarbon energy, it's back to the 12th century for humanity, and even more starkly worse for people in the developing world. These homegrown net zero nutbags and their executive general managers of people and culture are very busily modelling a fictional future where the proposed cure for climate change is worse than the disease.